my issue is that we need something concrete and immediate.
This is Taya reporting for the Real News Network in Baltimore City, Maryland. It was a public vetting that wasn't supposed to happen. A hearing in front of a federal judge to allow public input on the consent decree between the Baltimore City Police Department and the Department of Justice. The Trump administration asked for a delay as part of a nationwide review of similar agreements. The Department of Justice told the judge it was moving to a law and order policy that might preclude holding police departments accountable. But federal judge James K. Bredar denied the motion. And today, the citizens of Baltimore weighed in. I'm here with investigative reporter Janis, who's inside the courtroom. Stephen, can you tell us about what you heard today inside the courtroom and what the future of the consent decree looks like?
Well, as you mentioned, the Justice Department had asked for a delay in this particular. They asked for 90 days to review it because they said as part of the overall policy change, the Department of Justice, the Attorney General Jeff Sessions wanted to review all consent decrees, including this one, which has been signed. But interestingly, in the courtroom, the judge didn't seem to be too happy about that. He said, "Well, you signed it." Right in the middle, because the lawyers for the federal attorneys for the Department of Justice got up and argued and said, again, they reiterated what was in the motion, which motion clearly said our new policy is law and order, and we want to make sure that this consent decree doesn't conflict with that policy of law and order. And as I said before, the judge was like, well, you signed the agreement, and I don't see any reason to delay, and I'm not going to grant any delay right now. And that doesn't mean they can't file for another motion to delay. But nevertheless, right now, they're going forward, and it seems to me that this judge isn't going to countenance any sort of withdrawal from the Justice Department right off the bat.
So what happened in the courtroom? What did people say?
Well, as we've seen in many of these hearings and many of these public situations where the police department has been under scrutiny of the community, there was tremendous anger and frustration and tremendous outpouring. You had grief from mothers whose sons had died in police custody or been shot by police. You had community activists who said they've been advocating for change for years and it hasn't happened. You had ministers. You had people from the Latino community, people from transgender community. So you had an array of voices that seemed to voice the same concern, which is that the police department cannot be held accountable by the community and that the feds had to step in. So it was really, again, sort of an outpouring of pain that this flawed relationship with the Baltimore City Police Department and the public has engendered in this city. So it really was, again, people just expressing those thoughts and letting the judge know they wanted this consent decree to go forward.
So how did the judge react?
Well, as I said before, the judge seemed to not be very sympathetic to the Justice Department's request for delay or to pull back from this. It was interesting because the city solicitor, Mr. Ralph, argued that the city needs this because people don't trust Baltimore city government. Because it's interesting because, as we talked about in a few pieces before this, the city has every power to implement many of these reforms. But what the city solicitor said was, if we don't have the Department of Justice codifying this agreement and sort of enforcing it, the people in this community won't trust us. They will not trust the city itself. So it was a very interesting argument because he was saying we need this in order for the people to trust it. And the judge seemed to, I think, be in agreement. I think the judge is very sympathetic to this agreement. Now, remember that the Justice Department are the plaintiffs in this case, so it seems to me they have some option to withdraw. And they literally, did not back down from that today. So it'll be interesting to see. But after this testimony, I think the judge is in a position where he'll have to ignore the voice of the community in order to rule in favor of the Justice Department on anything.
So, Stephen, where do we go from here? What's next?
Well, next the Judge Bredar takes it back to his chambers, considers the testimony of the community. I would imagine the Justice Department is going to file another, either to withdraw or some sort of other motion about this amendment or something, because they seem very adamant that they are going to analyze and say, this doesn't help law and order. This conflicts. I'm not sure why constitutional following the law conflicts with law and order. It was interesting because Lawrence Grand Prix of Leaders of a Beautiful Struggle said very specifically, I don't know what you're talking about constitutional policing, because policing is not in the Constitution.
And neither was slavery.
Neither was slavery. So very interesting. So it's really now up to the judges, in the judges' hands. But I do think the Justice Department said explicitly that they're going to fight some aspect of this. So, but ultimately the judge is going to have some say as to what happened, because this has been signed. So it has been signed. It is a signed agreement. And then people should know that really it's in the judge's hands at this point.
Are you concerned about the influence of the Donald Trump presidency on the Department of Justice?
Absolutely, and the community overall was their initial concern after the election, and we had conversations with the Department of Justice, the representatives that worked with us previously, and they assured us that the work that they had engaged, what they had supported in this, and what they reported in this would be maintained. And so we were met with something else, and to be able to speak and meet eye to eye, with the attorney that sat in today. To speak to him, to let him know. Trust the vestment of the work that your representatives have already done. They engaged over a 2-year period, in our community. Give some value and some weight to the work of your own colleagues, and trust what they've already invested in this.
Now, when you read the consent decree, were you surprised at all to see some of the unconstitutional practices, some of the racist practices that were in the findings?
Absolutely not. Like I said, I live here. And as I said, I worked with, children that ended up in our detention centers. I've worked with adults who've been affected by it. I've worked with adults who've been in prison, served their time, and they come out and they were targeted once they got out, and how their lives were impacted. A gentleman that, he's a re-entering citizen. After he had been out, he, got a job and was, working and doing well for himself, and was arrested walking down the street, going from his home to a corner store, and he was arrested because he didn't have an ID, but he was held in a detention center, and ultimately lost his job for something that menial, but because they knew him and they were familiar with him, and that we have police that target those folks, and when they're making a genuine attempt, and not knowing what this gentleman had gone through before he even got back on the street. I worked with him internally while he was going through a reform program that encompass every manner of life that he would encounter, so that he would have a better perspective and a better opportunity when he got on the flip side. But when he gets outside and I'm still targeted by police officers, you have to do something about how they deal with us in our communities.
I came here to speak, to put forth the voice that is not heard in Baltimore City, the voice that is not viewed as what it truthfully is. Because before the consent decree was even proposed, before the DOJ even investigated the Baltimore City Police Department, it's just constantly been a cold war between the citizens and the police of Baltimore, and it shouldn't have to be like that. So I came here today to give the voice to the voiceless.
We can't do anything about it. They are officers. They are the law. So we can't sit here and deny the law, but we do know our rights. And we know that we can stand on that street, and we will. Now, when the officer pull out their stick or their gun or their mace or their taser, they're being a threat to us. And the best way we can do is use our voice, because that's all we have.
This is Taya and Stephen Janis reporting for the Real News Network in Baltimore City, Maryland.